The Allen Lund Company continues to support the owner-operators of OOIDA. Thank you for what you do, and stay safe.
OOIDA, representing America's truckers since 1973, presents Landline Now with your host, Mark Redding.
If you were to eliminate a regulation from the books, which one would it be? The DOT is asking, and the responses so far have run the gamut. Mark Schremer of Landline Magazine joins Scott Thompson with details. The Trump administration effort to roll back regulations covers every part of the federal government. Recently, the focus was on small business regulation and transportation, including trucking. I'll talk with OOIDA's Jay Grimes. Another Mid-America trucking show is done, and OOIDA was once again there to share tips on how to be successful. Ashley Blackford sits down with Andrew King of the OOIDA Foundation. And finally, it used to be that people managed their money. For many, that's not the case anymore for their personal finances, but it's vital for your business. And that has Marty Ellis thinking. I'll talk with the man who drives the spirit of the American trucker. And now, here's Scott Thompson.
Thanks, Mark. We've told you before about the USDOT opening up a comment period as they seek feedback on cutting regulations that have little to no safety benefit, and a theme is emerging. Mark Schremer has combed through the comments coming in, and he joins us now here in Studio A with the details. Mark, good to see you.
Yeah, Scott, thanks for having me.
Let's make sure everybody's up to speed here with what this comment period is all about. It is open now. It'll stay that way until May 5th, and essentially here the USDOT is asking for feedback on regulations.
Yeah, 100%. And, the Trump administration, a big thing since they've come in the first term, and also maybe even heightened here in the second term of President Trump, has been this idea of reducing burdensome regulations, reducing cost. And this is an opportunity that, actually putting out, the Department of Transportation put out a notice that said, hey, truck drivers, FAA, and all of the different sectors there for Department of Transportation say, okay, what are some regulations that are on the books that are burdensome, costly, and do not improve safety, and let us know. And then those will be ones that they'll look at as potentially putting on the cutting room floor to get rid of. And, I have worked covering trucking for nearly 10 years now. And for years and years, when you talk to truck drivers, they always talk about there being too many regulations that don't have any safety benefits that they have to comply with. And here we are. This is the opportunity in this 30-day comment period to say, start listing some of those that, you've been talking about, and let the DOT take a look at them and see if these are some of the ones that could be taken off the books. And so far, we already have looked this morning at about 519 comments that have already been put out there. But there should be, a lot more, hopefully, that we'll see before this comment period is over.
And truck drivers have thoughts on this. There are more than a few regulations they would like to see go away. We've talked, I think, before about hours of service being kind of a continuing theme throughout a lot of these comments here. Another one, and you've got a story on landline.media that just dropped recently talking about this. Another theme that you noticed as you combed through all the comments here is that people are pointing out their concerns about a proposed speed limiter mandate, which FMCSA, we should say, has not pulled yet. We kind of expected they would, but they haven't done that yet.
Yeah. And and this one is, again, this notice is kind of talking about regulations that are on the books that should be pulled. This one, like I said, is just a proposal. But it is a rulemaking that's been out there. It's been introduced several times over the last decade. It's been out there, and so drivers are do not want speed limiters mandated on their trucks. They point to all of the issues with speed differentials, concerns about road rage, all of those factors that they think that would actually make it less safe. And to your point, we do not expect President Trump's administration to move forward with this proposal. It was presented the same thing in the first term of President Trump, and he kind of put it on the back burner at that time. We expect the same to happen, but it has not happened yet. And so I think it is important for drivers to make sure that is pointed out, because if you remember too, ATA has largely been pro speed limiters, and I know they, also have, the president's ear from time to time on a lot of these type of issues. So I think it is important that drivers include this, even though it isn't technically a regulation on the books, but it's a potential regulation that could be there, and it is a great example, I think, of something that would be very costly. But also likely not benefit highway safety the way that proponents believe it would.
Yeah, and we were talking earlier, too, about some of the comments coming in. Again, this is the USDOT asking for people to point out regulations that are already in place that they would like to see go away, that they feel are burdensome. There are more than a few comments that have been coming in, ironically, that are kind of asking regulators to regulate more things. Brokers is something that keeps coming up as well, and obviously there are some rules in the books, that we would like to see them enforced better. But the people writing in, public service announcement. I think make your point and make sure that you're talking about regulations that are affecting you right now on a daily basis too, right?
Yeah, no, I think that's important, because I think a lot of people, like you said, combing through those comments, a lot of them have just kind of used this as an opportunity to be like an open forum.
Sounding board,
to just everything that we want to see done, either adding regulation or taking one off and doing all of that. And that's really not what this is for. I do think to be the most effective, stay on point and, look at those regulations. I think it's fine on the speed limiters because it is a rulemaking that's out there. And, and President Trump has issued the idea of for every new regulation, they would remove 10. So, letting him know this is not one of those regulations you want to add. I think that. But, I would stick to removal. And another thing I'll say, a lot of drivers have put on there about ELDs. And obviously OOIDA is very opposed to ELDs, fought that all the way, petitioning the Supreme Court. However, the part of it with this too is looking at ones that have been issued by FMCSA or the regulating but ELDs were mandated by Congress. Yeah. So that is going to be a much heavier ask of the administration to remove that. So you look at those ones, and I think hours of service flexibility is a great one where you could do some adjustments with it. And a lot of drivers have used that as an example, and I think that's a great one. But look at those regulations that do not improve safety on the books and try to focus on the ones that weren't mandated by Congress.
May 5th is a deadline. Mark, you've got a story on this very topic posted right now on our website, landline.media. It's got links there for folks who want to comment as well. So go check that out. Mark Schremer, everybody, thanks for your time.
Thank you.
And that's Landline Now News for today. Mark Rettig, back to you.
Thanks, Scott. Congratulations to David W. Murphy of Ivor, Virginia. He's received the OOIDA Safe Driving Award for 31 years of safe, accident-free driving. That's the equivalent of a car driver going 233 years without causing a single accident. Next, I'll discuss efforts to cut regulations with OOIDA's Jay Grimes, and Ashley Blackford covers OOIDA's educational efforts at MATS with Andrew King. We'll be right back. I'm Mark Rettig, and this is Landline Now.
Dispatch, I picked up that load of steel, so I'm ready to roll.
Sounds good. Remember, we're getting paid by weight, so make sure to use a CAT scale.
I wouldn't weigh anywhere else.
Forget misaccuracy when you're truck on a CAT scale.
Penske is the trusted source for quality used trucks. Whether you search our website, call our sales staff, or bid at our online auction, you are sure to find the right used truck for your business. Visit PenskeUsedTrucks.com to view our inventory and learn more.
With rising costs affecting everyone, switching to a genuine Vibertech TVD viscous damper can help you avoid expensive repairs and downtime. Save money and keep your truck running smooth with Vibertech TVD. Recommended replacement at 500,000 miles or 15,000 hours.
By now, most of you will have heard about the goal of the Trump administration to roll back many regulations on businesses. Now, that effort has turned to two areas of great interest to all of you: trucking and small business. Welcome back to Landline Now. This is Regulatory Roundup, and I'm Mark Rettig. I'm joined, as always, by OOIDA Director of Federal Affairs, Jay Grimes. Jay, how are you doing?
Doing well, Mark. Great to be back.
Well, glad to have you with us, and I'm sure a lot of people are celebrating when they hear what this is about. This involves a roundtable discussion that happened Wednesday, conducted by the Small Business Administration's Office of Advocacy. And I'm wondering if you could just start off telling us broadly about the event. What was the specific topic, who took part, and so on?
Yeah, so this was an event held kind of in the aftermath of DOT's announcement earlier this week. Earlier this month, DOT put out a request for information seeking comments on existing regulations, guidance, paperwork requirements, and other regulatory obligations that can be modified or repealed consistent with law. DOT is looking to ensure that administrative actions do not undermine the national interest and achieves meaningful burden reduction while continuing to meet the statutory obligations and to ensure safety of the U.S. transportation system. That DOT request for information open now for public comment, 30-day comment period through May the 5th. And I know we've talked a little bit about that here in the last couple of weeks, but the Small Business Administration's Office of Advocacy kind of held a follow-up event for small business associations and other interest groups within the transportation sector for them to kind of get a better idea of how small businesses are kind of what they're targeting for DOT to look at and how the Small Business Administration can be helpful. And the DOT Office of Advocacy is really designed to kind of help advance the views and concerns of small businesses before Congress, the White House, federal agencies, courts, and policymakers. So that they've worked with OOIDA on a number of issues over the years, trying to expand our advocacy efforts in a number of different ways. So certainly helpful for their assistance in this matter, and glad they were able to host this roundtable and hear our concerns and some of the major issues that we're going to be focusing on in our comments that we submit to DOT.
Well, and as you mentioned, OOIDA took part. A number of other groups, I'm sure, did. And a lot of the issues covered are very pertinent to individual truck drivers. I'm wondering if we can kind of talk about some of the issues, especially those that the association brought up. And I was noticing from a note you sent earlier that speed limiters was kind of top of list.
Yeah, for sure. I had the opportunity to join in with the roundtable. It's about a 2-hour conversation with all different transportation related groups, but wanted to make sure that the Small Business Administration was hearing from the largest trade association representing small business truckers. And, I told them, trucking remains one of the most heavily regulated industries in America. While compliance with the dizzying amount of regulations has never been higher, many of the policies in place have not improved highway safety or efficiency. And kind of top of mind among our members and certainly other groups over the last couple of years has been this proposed speed limiter mandate that was kind of reopened back in April of 2022 and made the case that any speed limiter mandate would be harmful for road safety, crash rates, driver retention, and supply chain performance. Earlier this year, OOIDA led a coalition effort with support from 20 other stakeholder industry groups that urged DOT to take deregulatory action by indefinitely postponing and hopefully ultimately withdrawing this proposed speed limiter mandate. And as DOT considers deregulatory action through this active and open public comment period, repealing this mandate would be a kind of an ideal way to start. So that was kind of our number one issue. Also talked about the need for more deregulatory action on hours of service. For years, OOIDA members have told FMCSA that existing hours of service rules are not sensible for today's trucking industry. Certainly some reforms we saw a few years ago back in 2020 were helpful, and they've been proven helpful, but have not fully resolved all the safety and efficiency challenges associated with current hours of service rules, specifically wanting to get more relief for giving drivers the option to pause their 14-hour duty clock with one off-duty period between 30 minutes and 3 hours once per day. Also supportive of expanding further split sleeper burst standards to include 6-4 and 5-5 splits. So that was the focus in hours of service. Certainly got a chance to talk about broker transparency, driver training. And a big question that that DOT is looking at through this notice is, does DOT currently collect information that it does not need to or does not use effectively? And that kind of really opens a Pandora's box on how FMCSA collects data. Is that data accurate? Is it uniform? And from our experience, that has not proven the case and really creates quite a different problems across many FMCSA platforms on how they compile, analyze, and use data to propose different regulations.
And in fact, this was one of the topics that really did catch my attention, Jay, because it is kind of in the background, and yet it has maybe one of the biggest impacts on drivers, because this does feed into the SMS, the safety management system. One of the points that the association has kind of talked about is uniformity in the data collected. And I'm wondering if you can explain what we mean by that and what kind of problem is that leading to?
Yeah, so a lot of the data and information that FMCSA collects is dependent on what they're getting from state driver's licensing agencies, law enforcement agencies, and a lot of these states don't collect the same uniform information. And furthermore, a lot of the violations that they may prioritize are different depending on which state, which region of the country carriers are operating in. So that can really throw off your safety score if you're operating in a place that really puts an emphasis on different violations, where we kind of see this. We kind of saw this in the National Academy of Sciences review of CSA and SMS over the last few years, where carriers in Texas are going to have a completely different score than carriers who are based in Indiana, just based on the amount of miles they travel through some of those states. And it really kind of creates, an inaccurate and inconsistent picture of how carriers whether they're performing safely. So that's a huge concern. Really want to improve that data across the board so FMCSA is not relying on these safety methodologies that really aren't painting an accurate picture. More recently, we've heard a lot of talk about non-domiciled CDLs, and FMCSA actually issued regulatory guidance in 2019 that created a loophole for states to issue more non-domiciled CDLs. And despite our best efforts to obtain more information, it does not seem like any federal or state agency has a clear understanding of how many truckers are utilizing non-domiciled CDLs. So it's kind of hard to really speculate. We can only speculate at this point, how many of these are being issued. We don't really have any way of knowing right now whether non-domiciled CDL drivers are operating safely and how they might be affecting working conditions for small business truckers. So really across the board, a couple of examples on how inaccurate, inconsistent data across a number of FMCSA platforms needs to be improved.
You mentioned the non-domiciled CDLs, and just to clarify, I mean, one of the big problems there are drivers from other countries who are brought in on the basis of the fictitious driver shortage and may or may not speak the English language or be able to read it, and taking essentially putting downward pressure on rates in the trucking industry because of all the additional labor available.
Exactly. And this has really been a hot topic issue over the last few months. And we've kind of seen different states will issue these CDLs at different rates. And there's different criteria to obtaining the non-domiciled CDLs and what types of documentation that you have to submit to the state driver's licensing agencies. And in some cases, it's very minimal in terms of having all the credentialed work documentation to be in the country legally for a significant amount of time.
I did want to cover one other point on this, Jay. I mean, some of this is information they're collecting that's not really helpful. And I remember an example from several years ago that form and manner violations, where you just make a paperwork mistake, being counted against people's safety score at that time. I don't know if it still is or not, but I suspect it is. But what are some examples of data that they should collect, but that they aren't? I mean, the non-domiciled CDLs would be one example, I guess.
Right, and there's a whole host of violations that count against a carrier safety score that really have no connection at all to safety overall. And what we really want to see is a prioritization on safety violations that have really proven to impact crash rates for carriers. But you mentioned some of these meticulous violations, such as form and manner. Another representative participating in the roundtable brought up excessive amounts of fire extinguisher violations for carriers in a certain state that really are by far and away the most violations are written up for that fire extinguisher, where they're not in the right place, or they don't have the right amount of fluid, and it just doesn't seem to dictate if you're going to operate your truck safely whatsoever. So really prioritizing the violations that are going to have a clear impact on crash rates and safety performance is really what we need to see done across the board at FMCSA when it comes to these safety programs.
Well, we have a little bit of time left, not much, but I did want to ask you, now that this event has occurred, what is the next step in this process, and when are we likely to see some actual results in terms of regulatory rollback?
Yeah, so the public comment period, again, is going to be open for a couple more weeks till Monday, May 5th. So, and the representatives on the SBA call, I think they really said everything is on the table here. So encourage everyone to submit their comments. The docket number is DOT-OST-2025-0026. And they're really wanting to see what drivers have to say, see what regulations needs to go, see what regulations can be modified to have a better impact on cost benefit, on compliance with regulation, and really at the end of the day, improving safety. Let's get rid of regulations that are costly and not having any impact on safety. Let's improve regulations that can be modified to drive down crash rates. So that's going to be the next milestone date. And then, of course, DOT will take some time to review all the public comments and hopefully start chipping away at some of these unnecessary regulations.
Excellent. Well, Jay, thank you very much for all the information. We sure appreciate it.
Sure thing. Thank you.
I've been talking with OOIDA Director of Federal Affairs, Jay Grimes. Landline Now will be back in a moment.
At Truck Stop, we built a better load board for carriers like you. Sign up today and access over 600,000 loads on the most trusted online load board. Learn why the best in the business rely on Truck Stop to make more money and start driving your profit today.
Are you tired of the IRS following you around like a dark cloud? Call 888-557-4020 and get your life back.
Firestone's FD694 drive tire for long haul and regional applications now delivers 126,000 more removal miles than the Yokohama TY517 MC2. Contact your Firestone commercial dealer to learn more.
Landline Now, welcome back. Andrew King joins me now. He is Foundation Director at OOIDA. Andrew, thanks for coming in.
Yeah, it's always a joy to be here.
Now, it's been a couple weeks now since the Mid-America Trucking Show happened. I just want to start off asking how the show went for you overall.
I thought it went awesome. I know we were actually just talking about this here recently in an internal meeting of just how well it went. You know, we had a lot of business. It seemed like someone was always going through our booth. We're always talking to somebody. You know, we did it a little bit different this year. We were in a different location. We had a different setup, and I think it went really, really well. And in fact, the whole team, everyone who went had a very positive outlook on just being able to talk to members. And that's the thing that's always nice. And I think we might have mentioned this before, but, you know, for someone like me, I'm not on the phone that much. I don't get to interact with our members on a day-to-day basis like other people at OOIDA do. And so it's always nice to actually see them face-to-face, talk with them, laugh with them, and get to know their story.
Yeah, I think that's what makes the show so fun, is getting to talk to these guys and gals that are usually out on the road but are taking their time off.
Absolutely. Well, and it gives me better perspective because, you know, I'm a data guy. And the thing about data is it doesn't really tell the whole story. You know, it's one thing to read about what's happening in freight market type stuff and things of that nature. But then for someone who's living it, because it's literally their bread and butter, you know, that's totally different than my perspective. So it's really good to have that extra, expand my vision.
Yeah. Now, you were one of the many speakers there doing the Pro Talks. What did you talk about there?
So I did a portion of our seminar, Truck to Success, and it was on creating a business plan, which I know that doesn't sound super exciting, but actually went really well. And we had, the whole thing was basically full, so there's probably over 100 people. And then, of course, there's people walking by all the time during the course of it, and some even standing off to the side to listen to the presentation. So I think it was well received.
Now, you start off with statistics, which normally, I think numbers, sometimes people kind of their eyes glaze over.
Yeah.
But the statistics you start with this kind of, I assume, get people to kind of perk up. And talk to me about what those were.
Yes, that's the hope anyway. You know, there's something about trying to frame it in a story that really gets people engaged and just understanding the dangers of becoming an owner-operator. You know, obviously you can have a high reward. There's a lot of potential in stepping out and becoming your own business, basically. But that also comes with a lot of risk. And so we kind of give the statistics talking about risk to get people's attention so that they kind of dial in and really focus on what we're trying to say. Because we don't want to be discouraging, but we also want to be real. And the statistic that I was sharing is basically the failure rate for those who enter into trucking or become a motor carrier. We have a couple different sources, and basically between 20, 30%, somewhere around that area, give or take, which depending on the year, that new carrier will fail within their first year, which is quite a bit. And then by year number 5, it's over 60%, right? So, you know, if you had that room, there's 100 people listening, over 60 of them are not going to make it by year number 5. You know, that's a pretty scary detail. And the second one we show is that regardless of what's transpiring in the market, the failure rate basically stays the same. So even in 2021, where the rates were absolutely astoundingly high, you know, people were still failing, even in a good market like that. And then on the flip side, even in a bad market, there's people who are still succeeding. And so having a business plan can help you succeed no matter what's going on in the market, because that's really important, to be able to protect and insulate your business so that no matter what's going on in the market, you can still be successful. You know, you can, keep your eyes out for those threats, but also be willing to see those opportunities and take advantage of them.
Now, you mentioned a few reasons why businesses fail. What were those?
So the top 3 are lack of sufficient capital. So obviously starting a business of any kind, but trucking is going to be expensive. Your truck is going to be very expensive, obviously. And then the other thing, especially if you're jumping right into having your own authority, which we recommend you don't do, insurance, insurance premiums, that could be $20,000 or more, especially depending on your experience. And that is a lot of money. And so if anything goes wrong, you have a breakdown here or there, you're not able to get the loads that you're hoping for, whatever, just the littlest thing can basically knock you out of the business. So, and then number 2 is inadequate management. So people who they drive really well, they know that part of trucking, but they don't really know the ins and outs of managing a business, the permits, the licensing, the insurance, the taxes, all this different thing that you have to stay on top of. You're not just driving, you're also getting your own freight, you're booking your own freight, you got to bill it. All these things go into play, and that can be overwhelming, especially if you haven't been in trucking for at least some time. And then the last one is the poor business planning or the no business planning. The guy who or gal who just gets a truck and basically has no clue what they're doing other than they just did that. They don't know how to get freight. They think they're going to run in all 48 states, all this sort of thing. They basically have no plan. And so when the market goes down, those are the people who definitely will not make it in a down market. And they might not make it even when the market's doing well.
Now, you also mentioned that you guys have a sample business plan. Is that right? Yes.
And we actually gave that out. And people can feel free to email me, Andrew_King at OOIDA.com, and I can get that to you. You can also find it online, I believe, but it'd probably be easier instead of navigating our website. It'd be easier just to email me and I can give that to you. So it's in a PDF format, but it basically covers everything that we talked about in the presentation, and you could just take that and modify it a little bit. I think also it's nice to see that it's not really that complicated. It's not big. Basically every page or every section just has a paragraph or two. It's not like you're writing some kind of novel or book. And having that information ahead of time and just plugging in what you yourself are looking to do in your business can be really helpful to get people off the ground.
You'd mentioned a story, I believe it was at one of the Truck to Success seminars, where someone put the numbers in and it kept coming up red. Talk to me about that story.
Yeah. So we have also a cost per mile calculator, and that you can find on the website. But again, you could also email me and I can send it to you. And so during the actual class, what we do is we present that calculator, which is an Excel spreadsheet, and it's got the formulas all built in. And we play with it a little bit, and then I send it with them, so that they can, over the course of that night or whatever, they can basically mess with it. And there was this couple who had put in all their numbers that night, and when they came back that next morning before the seminar even started, they said, "Hey, can you come over and take a look at this?" And they were like, "Is this working? I don't think it's working." And I looked at it because they said, all the numbers are red; they're all in the red. And I took a look at it. I'm like, "No, yeah, it's working."
Yeah.
And they had no idea that they were losing money every time they were hauling a load. They were losing money. And their dad, who also happened to be there at that seminar, they said, "Don't tell him," because they had no clue.
Yeah.
And it blows my mind, but that goes back to the no business planning. People who aren't keeping track of these things, you can't really know where you are and where you're trying to go if you're not measuring things, And so I know it takes a little bit of time, but what you get from it really makes up for the few minutes that it takes to plug in some numbers.
Now, you've given this talk in the past. Was there anything different about this year's talk compared to the ones in years past?
Well, besides just the layout, I guess we changed the layout a little bit. But, we have slimmed it down somewhat to be a little easier to understand. So, for example, when we get into the cost of operations, I used to have more different ratios that people could use to kind of gauge the health of their business, but you really don't need all of that. So I just limit it to the top 3, and that's basically your cost of operating or your operating ratio, which basically is gauging the efficiency of, how much profit are you making considering all the losses that you're taking just to run your truck and your business. Your working capital ratio, which is basically how much cash you have on hand. So if something were to happen, can you still sustain your business? And lenders are going to look at this sort of thing. anyone who's bought a house or something, they actually are taking the information you give them and they're plugging them into these ratios, which you yourself can do just to get an understanding of, okay, am I in a healthy spot or am I not? And what can I do then to change that to get me back into a healthy status? And the last one we talk about is a debt ratio. So basically how much of your company is leveraged by debt. So if you had a loan on a truck and then you wanted to go get another trailer or two, or maybe you wanted to expand your business, someone who's going to lend you money, they want to know how much debt you already have to see if you're a safe person to lend to. So being aware of those sort of things and what a bank or others might look at is helpful. But even just for yourself to periodically go over it and just see where you are, to know, if you're close to red, maybe there's something that you need to change in your operations, whatever that might be. And this will help you stay ahead of that.
Now, you fielded a few questions at the session. One asked, could someone become an owner-operator right out the gate? What was your response to that?
Well, the answer is you could, but we strongly recommend that you don't, which you kind of mentioned earlier. There's a lot of risk here, and if you don't really know what you're doing, it's important that you start off at least as a leased-on owner-operator. I mean, it would be good if you had some company driver experience just to know what the lifestyle is like, because this is quite an undertaking. There is a lot of churn in our industry. Some of that's because they don't get paid very well, but the other thing is you don't get treated the best sometimes. It's a thankless job, as Louis often talks about. And so getting yourself familiar with kind of the lifestyle, and then on top of that, being leased on, you get a better understanding of taking on more responsibility. You don't have to cover everything, but you do have to do some things on your own, and that will help you build relationships. Because what I have found time in and time out when I talk to board members or other owner-operators who've been in business for 20-plus years, they were able to establish some type of relationship with a customer, with a shipper or small manufacturer, something like that, so that they have dedicated freight. And that really helps keep them safe from when the market's going haywire. And then they just use the load board when they need it. And so having that experience, building those relationships takes time. And it would be really hard for someone to just jump in right away and be successful, because you're probably just going to live off of load boards. And that's really not a good place to be. It's going to be more difficult. I'm not saying it's impossible, but that's why we recommend you don't go that route. You start off with a progression.
So obviously your Pro Talk had a lot of good information to educate people. I'm curious, did you learn anything while you were at the show and talking to other people there?
I mean, just listening to their stories is always helpful. Again, I look at rates and I see this from my perspective, but it's not my bottom line at the end of the day. So just hearing from them, hearing some of the questions and the concerns that they have is always helpful for me. When we first started doing our monthly market update back in 2021 or whatever, I kept saying, the rates are still good. The rates are still good. They're better than what they were before when we started to hit that downturn. But I really wasn't understanding, what it would be like to be on the road and not have the rates that you need in order to feed your family and keep your business up and running. And so it's always good to just hear from members and truckers and hear their story.
And quickly, I just want to talk, Truck to Success is coming up this year. Talk to me about when that is.
Yeah, October 21st to the 23rd. You can sign up right now. You can find it at trucktosuccess.com and register.
All right. Andrew, thank you so much.
Thank you.
If you want to watch Andrew's Pro Talk, you can find it on the Trucking Show YouTube page. And if you want more information on Truck to Success, visit OOIDA.com and click on the menu tab and go to the education list. For Landline Now, I'm Ashley Blackford. Stay tuned for more after this.
Protect your diesel engine with Howe's Diesel Defender. Restore vital lubricity, eliminate injector deposits, and boost fuel economy by 5% or more. Power, performance, protection, all in one. Howe's Diesel Defender, available now.
Since you started, what you've loved about trucking is the freedom. Heading out on your favorite route, a good driving song, and thinking about truck insurance. Well, maybe not that last one. That's why we're here. At OOIDA, we have a full range of truck insurance products, expert advice, and great customer service, helping you get the right coverage for your operation. Go to OOIDA.com because your job is to drive. Our job is to help with everything else.
Landline Now, welcome back. Every week, we check in with Marty Ellis, who drives OOIDA's tour truck, the Spirit of the American Trucker. It used to be that people managed their money. They would balance their checkbooks every month, and they knew what they were spending money on and how much they had left after the bills were all paid. For many, that's not really the case anymore with personal finances, but it's something that's vital for you to do for your business. And that has Marty thinking.
Carolina west to Denver, up to Bangor, west to Austin, coast to coast, sea to sea, sail on, sail on.
Well, Marty, how are you doing?
I am lovely, Mark. And you?
Well, I'm doing just fine, just fine. We're kind of in an odd week here, and you're kind of between duties. So I thought we'd just dive right in this week into some of the issues that truckers are talking about. And one of them you brought up, which can mean a lot of things, but you talked about managing money. Now, is this like while you're on the road in the truck? Or are you talking about at home? What money and where are you managing it?
Well, all of the above. And, so many people get into truck ownership thinking, okay, I'll make a lot more money, and they don't plan it all out where if you don't take care of the money you have right now, just because you get more money doesn't mean you're going to be able to manage it well if you don't work on that, whether it's as a employee driver, a 1099 driver, or a lease operator or lease purchase. Doesn't matter where you're at right now. If you're not handling the money correctly right now, it's not going to get any better. It doesn't matter if there's more money coming in. It doesn't always fix things. And so, I've always, sit and talk to people about, well, they get into a lease purchase because they don't have any money down. They don't have good credit. And, well, that should be red flags for yourself to say, hey, hold it. What can I do to change myself right now and my finances? So when I do want to pursue, whether it's purchasing a truck or purchasing a trailer or whatever that is, or a house, a new car, if you don't have your finances in order, the older I get, sometimes you have to remind yourself, if you're not doing well, you need to quit digging, So many times I talk to somebody that's, up around my age, and it's like we talk about finances and, well, they just put this on their credit card and went on that vacation on credit card. And it's like, you do realize at some point in time, if you think you're in a ditch, you need to stop digging, So if guys need some help, there's a lot of things online you can check out. Even here at OOIDA, we have, the expenses where you can get the form to fill out for your expenses to know what you are, your cost per mile is, and that. And each one of us need to do that somewhere in their life, whether it's, through a trucking company, knowing what your numbers are and where you're spending the money and possibly where you can save it. And then, but we also can do that in our own personal money, not just the truck. And I think we would all do a little bit better if we just paid more attention to that instead of making that big jump and saying, oh, yeah, now I'll make some money. And then it just seems to exacerbate the problem, and you end up worse off than what you were when you started thinking that you didn't have the money to do certain things.
Yeah, I think especially when you're talking about the business side of it, the trucking side, I think Louis Pugh said once that he sees it as not a penny earned business, but a penny saved business. That one of the few things you can control is how much money is going out the door. But you don't know what rate you have to make money if you don't know what things are costing you. There's just no way to know that. And tracking those expenses and learning some basic bookkeeping, I would think that'd have to be a must.
Yeah. But, so many times, we used to basically learn some of this stuff either from our parents or in school. And so many people aren't getting those, how do you balance a checkbook or how do you balance a budget? So many people just, whatever they got deposited in their account, they just have to look at their account and see what they've spent already to see if they can now buy that dinner or whatever. And instead of actually planning it out. And I agree with Louis, this business especially is, a penny saved business.
Well, and I think even in personal finances, again, if you don't know what life is costing you, you don't really know if you're earning enough to cover it. And if you're ending up in the red every month, you're right. Someday that bill's going to come due. And especially with credit cards, the interest rates on credit cards are out of control. And boy, the best thing you can do if you use one is pay it off every month. But I know a lot of people can't do that.
Yeah, it's a challenge, because it seems like once you get down a little bit, it's hard to get dug back out. And you're right. I've seen some of those credit card percentages, interest rates. It's like, holy buckets. I mean, some of them are around 30%.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, they'll take you if you let them.
Exactly.
Well, something else that's kind of linked to this that you brought up is who people go to help them prepare their taxes. And boy, does that kind of dovetail with this nicely. What kind of brought that topic to your mind, Marty?
Yeah, a lot of guys will come in around this time of year and, they need some tax help and don't know where to turn. And so many times once they get behind on their taxes, because if you're, of course, an owner-operator, you should be doing your quarterly taxes. And so many people don't because I still got a lot of time. I can worry about saving that money to pay those taxes. And then all of a sudden, tax time comes and it's like, I don't have the money for that. And so it's better to head off the tax guy early than late. And even if you are in trouble, it's best to go to a tax professional. If you're not sure about how to do your taxes online and by yourself, it's so much easier to hire somebody to go and do your taxes so it's done right instead of guessing and wondering, gosh, did I do it right? Am I going to get audited? All the above. And so many, we have a tax gal that does a lot of trucking taxes, and what she charges us to do our taxes is basically about the same as we would do it ourselves online through a service.
Yeah. Something else I would add to that is get a tax preparer, like you said, that knows the trucking business, because there are differences. And the classic one being the per diem. The per diem is entirely different in trucking than it is for any other profession. And you actually get to deduct more money from your per diem. So you want someone who understands those industry-specific things so that they get you every penny back that you deserve.
Absolutely.
Okay. Well, Marty, I think that's the end of the road for us here. If you got any final words that you want to offer up to people before you ride off into the sunset?
Make sure you pay your taxes on time so no penalties. And, of course, be kind to one another and give that driver next to you a break.
Brothers of the highway, children of the wind.
Once again, that was Marty Ellis, who drives OOIDA's tour truck, The Spirit of the American Trucker. You can find Marty's next stop at our show and every day at our website, landlinenow.com. That includes truck stops, truck shows, and other special events across the country. Again, that's at landlinenow.com. You can also find the Spirit's complete schedule at OOIDA.com. Just go to the main menu at the upper left corner of the page, and under Membership, click on OOIDA on Tour. There you can find the next month or so of where the Spirit is headed. Again, that's at the association's website, OOIDA.com. Meanwhile, if you have questions about anything else, call the association's main number at 816-229-5791. That's our program for today. Thank you very much for joining us. I'm Mark Rettig, and this is Landline Now.
Thanks for listening. Be sure to like and subscribe. If you want more content, go to landline.media to get updated news, information, and archived editions of our show. Once again, that's landline.media.
I'm a dad,
a son,
a husband,
wife.
I'm a writer,
photographer.
I farm.
I'm a veteran.
I love old cars, fishing,
my kids,
Chrome,
and I am
a professional truck driver.
And together we are OOIDA.
OOIDA was founded by truckers to stand up and speak on behalf of truckers. We've done that by combining the individual voices of our members into a single, powerful voice. Protecting your interests, defending your rights.
Join us! Make your voice heard. Join OOIDA, the Owner-Operator Independent Drivers Association. Call 1-800-444-5791 or visit OOIDA.com.